Hi, in this video, we're going to talk about this is going to be the first actually in a series of videos about your computer science IA. Okay, so today I'm just going to introduce you to the computer science IA and talk about your first steps. Okay, so basically, this is your opportunity for you to showcase your algorithmic and technical prowess. All right, so you really want to use this as an opportunity to show off how good you are at programming and how good you are at designing programs. Okay. Um, you will be asked to analyze algorithms in the exam, and you'll be asked to maybe write a little bit of Java code in the exam in paper two, but this is your real opportunity to show the examiner what you are capable of. Okay. So you're going to be allocated 30 hours. So we're going to have about 30 hours of lesson time allocated to your IA. So that'll be opportunities for us to talk through the different stages of your IA and for me to give you advice on what to do at each stage. Okay, that will also provide you with some opportunity to do some work in class. Okay, but there is an expectation that you'll also spend about another 30 hours doing this independently on your own at home. Okay, so just be aware that this is a major project and should take up about 60 hours of your time. Okay, now it's interesting the way that the IA is graded. Okay, so one of the interesting things, or one of the important things that you need to understand is that I am asked to mark it according to the level of complexity and ingenuity that it demonstrates. Okay, so we are looking for you. We're not looking for just, this project doesn't have to be huge, all right? But what we're really looking for is for you to demonstrate complexity in your code and maybe even ingenuity. Now, I know it's difficult to come up with novel ideas in computer science, but we are looking for you to explore different ways of doing things and to try new things. Okay, that we can't teach in the course. This is your opportunity to have a mess around with that. Okay, now, this gets forgotten quite a lot in the internal assessment. Okay, just because you learn Java doesn't mean that Java has to be the language that you use for your IA. All right, because the way you need to look at this is you need to start um, by identifying a problem. Okay, and this is the mistake that people make. People often have an idea for an IA, and then they try and find a client that will help them, that will be their client for that solution that they've got. That's the wrong way around. Okay, what you're looking for here, you need to start by looking for a problem. So you need to find a client who's got a problem, and then your job is to create a solution to that problem. Okay, and then the programming language that you choose should be specific to that problem. So, if someone comes to you and says, well, hang on, I've got a hotel business, I need some way for people to be able to book rooms online. All right, well, there's no way you can justify doing that in Java. Yeah, there's it just wouldn't work. Okay, so that would require a PHP solution with probably MySQL as your database. Okay, so the solution you choose and the rationale for choosing that solution needs to be legitimate. Okay, it can't just be because I know Java, so I'm going to create it in Java. All right, so really keep that in mind when you're identifying a client and the problem. Okay, so we're just going to move on now. Look, what's important here, okay, is that you follow the 5 stages of the software development lifecycle. Okay, so these are the 5 stages of the software development lifecycle. So the first thing that you are going to do is you are going to identify a client, and then you're going to analyze the problem. Now we've already spent a lesson talking about analysis and the kind of techniques that you can use, such as questionnaires and interviews, and the kind of questions that you need to ask to find out about the problem from your client. Okay, so it's really, really important that you spend a suitable amount of time doing your analysis and understanding what the problem is that you are trying to solve. Okay, and you should maybe get some samples of documentation from the system that they use already. So, back to that hotel booking system, maybe you can get an example or a photo of the booking system they currently use. Maybe it's it might be a paper-based book, mightn't it, where they put the rooms in. So, you need to get a photo of that and say, well, this is their existing solution. So, and the problem with this is, all right, and that's what we're looking to do as part of that analysis phase. Okay, now Once you've completed the analysis phase, and at this point, I only expect you to be identifying the client and giving me some suggestions about the kinds of things that you might want to create. All right. But once you've completed your analysis, you will come up with, at the end of that stage, you will have a list of requirements. All right. So a list of success criteria that will help you determine at the end of the project whether you've been successful. Okay. So once you've got that success criteria, you can then move on to the design phase of your project. All right. So here is where you need to think about, well, um, how is data going to be input into this system? All right, so you'll be designing input interfaces. You'll be thinking about, well, what's the data going to look when it comes out? So you'll be thinking about the output screens and things like that. Okay, you'll be thinking about how you're going to store the data. Is your um, does your program need to have some kind of persistent storage? Okay, does it need to remember things when you turn it off and then turn it back on again, and all these things? Okay, and if it does need that, how's that going to be stored and in what format? All right, so all of those questions you're going to answer during the design phase. Okay, now those two phases are really important. They're worth 12 marks. Okay, now so what I'm trying to say to you is those two phases are as important as the development phase. Now, it's difficult, I know, because you're going to want to just get straight on with the development, but the development actually is only worth 12 marks, which is the same amount as the analysis and design. So, it is worth spending time on the analysis and the design and not rushing straight to the development. Okay, and I can tell you that from my experience, um, the best projects are ones where the analysis and design um, have been done well. Okay, now I'm not saying that you have to kind of make sure it's dot all the I's and cross all the T's, as we say in the UK. Okay, but what I am saying is you need to have some idea of what it's going to look like and how it's going to work before you start the development. Okay, now there's nothing stopping you obviously doing some kind of prototyping approach where you develop something, you take it back to your client, and then they give you some more input into the design and changes they would like you to make. So you go back to the design and then back to the development, back to the design, back to the development. Okay, so that's a good way to do this. And the more you can, and we've talked about this as well, the more you can include your client in this process at the different stages, the better your internal assessment will be. Okay, so once you've completed your test, your development, just like any piece of software, okay, once you've completed your development, you're then going to test it. All right, so you're then going to spend some time doing some kind of alpha testing, some beta testing. All right, obviously you're going to give it to your client for them to have a look and for them to do some testing. All right, and from that you're going to get some feedback, and you might have to go back up to the development and do some more development at that point, or you might move on to the next phase, which is the implementation. Okay, so you need to understand that the examiner expects there to be a real client. This is a real project, a real piece of software for a real client. All right. So when it comes to the implementation, the examiner is going to expect you to have to implement the project. You can't just talk about designing a hotel booking system and then not implement it for the client. So the examiner is going to expect you to say, okay, well, in my implementation phase, I'm going to organize the hosting. I'm going to upload it to the hosting software. I'm going to train my client on how to use the system. I'm going to train the staff on how to use the system. All of those things that you'd expect to do in the implementation phase of a project, the examiner is going to expect you to do. All right. So I can't emphasize that enough. All right. It is hugely important that you find a client and that client is someone that can be with you throughout the whole process. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about requirements for a client in a minute. Okay, um, so if we just have a look at this slide, so this basically just takes you through the different parts of your internal assessment. So again, this is really important to understand. When I mark this, okay, there is no need for me, all right, to look at your project, your actual product if I don't want to. Okay, you're going to create a video, which you can see is criterion D, which I will mark, but there is no actual thing that says in the mark scheme that I have to look at your product. All right, so the documentation is the important part of this project. All right, so you're going to produce 5 pieces of documentation that are all going to come together into one big project. Okay, so you've got criterion A, which is basically your analysis. Okay, that's going to be about 500 words and is worth 6 marks, as we've already discussed. That's made up of those 3 parts that you can see on the slide. All right, we've got criterion B, which is made up of those two parts, the design and the record of tasks. All right, there's no real word count for that because most of that should be diagrams or tables. Um, so, there's an expectation that there won't be a huge amount of continuous prose there, so that doesn't really count towards the word count. That is also worth 6 marks, that part. Okay. Then criterion C. All right. Now, I do recommend you do this as you create your product. All right. It makes life a lot easier for you if you do your criterion C as you create your product. So basically, the idea of criterion C is you're going to take the examiner through the process of creating your product. All right. And you're going to justify the reasons, the choices that you've made. Okay. So, if you decide to use a series of nested if statements or nested loops, you would need to explain why you used why you constructed your algorithm in that way, okay, and your reasons for doing that. All right. So there is an expectation there. There is an expectation there that that you will there will be some continuous prose in there. Okay, so that word count is going to be up to about 1,000 words. Okay. Criterion D then is a video, so you're going to produce a video which is just going to take the examiner, the marker, through the functionality of your product. Okay, so ideally what it should do is it should demonstrate the success criteria that you came up with in criterion A, and it should also discuss extensibility. So what do I mean by that? It should discuss how extensible your project was, and that means basically, could someone else take your product and improve it and make changes to it and make it even better? Okay, and so again, we will discuss how you can ensure extensibility. Okay, the final criterion, which is criterion E, is of course your evaluation, and in this part of the process, you need to make sure you go back to your client. You need to get some feedback from them about what they think about the product that you've developed, and that will form part of your evaluation. Okay, in that section, you're also going to make sure that you talk about what things you would do to improve your product, how you would change it in the future if you had more time. Okay, so again, that's going to be continuous prose. That's going to be up to about 500 words, and that's worth 6 marks. Okay, so what you need to understand in total, the maximum amount of marks for this is 2,000 words. All right, so the marker won't read anything over 2,000 words. All right, so that's the important part to understand about the project. But this documentation, this written documentation, is the really important part of the process. Okay, so I've already kind of talked about this a little bit, but your choice of client is really important. Okay, and it can make or break a project. And I can't emphasize this enough. Year after year, I get students trying to pretend that they have a client and they don't really. Okay, and they're making the client up. Okay, and the thing is, it is very obvious to me and to the moderator when students do this. Okay, I can't emphasize that enough. From my experience, okay, the best projects are ones where you've got a real client and you're in constant communication with that client. Okay, now in terms of who it can be, ideally it's someone close to you that you can work with for about 6 to 9 months, which is the length of time this process is going to take. Okay, so it needs to be a teacher, a parent, a friend, or anyone like that. As I said, it needs to be an actual person and they need to be able to work with you. Okay. Now you need to be able to, what they need to do, okay, is they need to have a problem. They need to be able to explain what their needs are, what they require. Okay. And you need to be able to go back to them with your success criteria and they need to agree on that success criteria. Okay. They will also need to spend time with you when you completed the solution, talking to you about to evaluate your solution and giving you some feedback about what they think about your solution. Okay. Okay. So now you can, and it does make it clear. The examiner does make it clear that you can be your own client as long as you've got an advisor. I would not recommend this though. Okay. It just makes life very complicated. Okay. So where possible, I would not recommend that you be your own client. All right, it's just not something. It's just not a good idea. Okay, so look, I think what's really important here, and I'm going to say it again and repeat it again, is this is all about quality, not quantity. Okay, so you are looking to find a problem that is challenging and that allows you to showcase, your programming techniques and your organization techniques and your algorithmic thinking. Okay, so as again, it's about quality, not quantity. All right. Um, the thing often I get a lot of, like the hotel booking system. The thing about the hotel booking system, is it a good project? The thing is, I think there's a lot of kind of grabbing information from a database and then displaying it, but you're not actually doing much with that data. Okay, so it is about thinking about algorithms rather than, you don't want to end up just you don't want to end up just pulling data from a database or from a text file and displaying it. You need to be doing something with that data. All right, and so in terms of algorithmic thinking, that's where you're going to get your marks for algorithmic thinking. So just really think about projects like that. Okay. Things like, I mean, examples could be, working out a route between one place and another. Okay. I had a student who developed a project where they worked out a route between one room in the school and another room in the school for students that were new to the school. Okay, that's a good example of algorithmic thinking, rather than just displaying data that's been pulled from a database or from a text file. Okay, um, we've already mentioned this, and I mention it again. You don't have to use the programming language that is taught in class. Okay. You need to use the programming language that best fits the project. Okay, that's really, really, it's really, really important. Okay. All right. Um, so look, if some examples of good ideas, if you're really, really stuck for an idea. Okay, you could do. I quite like this one. Okay, I think there is some scope here around storing sports stats. So in our school we have lots of sports teams. We've got a basketball team, we've got a football team. Um, sorry, soccer team. We've got various volleyball teams, and I'm sure in the summer there'll be athletics and tennis and things like that. So there is scope there for some kind of stats recording system, and there is scope for algorithmic thinking there in terms of, ordering stats and comparing stats, um, putting stats into various different formats such as charts and things. Okay. Um, the idea of a booking reservation system, again, you need to think about where the algorithmic thinking is going to come along. Okay, an inventory system. I do quite like this idea of maybe a school management app. I think there maybe is potential for coming up with a Nord Anglia, Bish kind of homework, house point, lots of things all together system perhaps. And of course that could be done um, as a mobile app, which would be great. Okay. Anything you can come up with in terms of the Internet of Things or electronics or robotics would be really interesting. Okay. And this idea of problem solving game. What do I mean by that? I quite like these projects around coming up with using artificial intelligence where you play lots and lots of games and you come up with novel ways, maybe to play it and all the rest of it. So that's something maybe you could look at. All right, so those are just some ideas that you might want to consider if you're struggling to come up with an idea for yourself. Okay. um, but as I said, most importantly, what you really want to do is just find a real project, okay, and a real client and someone who's got a real problem. Okay, and you know the better the problem and the realer the client. That doesn't really make sense, does it? But you know what I mean. The better this whole thing will be. Okay. um Look, I just want to take you through, and this is again in the form that you're going to get your client to sign, but it is important that they understand that you need to make it clear to your client that there are some implications for agreeing to be your client. Okay, they will need to meet with you for at least two occasions during the analysis phase. You will need to interview them, first of all, and then later on, once you've come up with your success criteria, you'll need to go back to them and get them to agree it. Okay, you will need to create recordings or transcripts of these conversations, so they need to be aware of that. They also need to be aware that there'll be another, you'll need to meet with them again at the end of the project so they can have a look at what you've produced and evaluate it. Okay. Ideally, they need to be a person that you can have occasional contact with, so that maybe you can give them, maybe you've designed some interfaces, and you can email them and say, look, what do you think of these? Are there any improvements that you'd like me to make? Are you happy with the colors and things like that? Okay, so the more involved your client can be, and the more they understand that they need to be involved, it's not just a one-off thing. This, okay, the better prepared they will be. Okay, there we go. I think we've kind of talked about that. All right, so so this has just been a brief introduction to what you need to the internal assessment. This is video number 1 in the series. Okay, the next video will be about the analysis and what you're going to do for your analysis. Okay, what you need to do is you need to return the client nomination form to me by the 11th of May. Okay, if you've not quite firmed up a client and you don't think you're going to meet that deadline, then at least upload some suggestions that you've got for who your client might be and the project that you might do. All right, and then we're going to start work on criterion A by the 18th of May. We'll get criterion B done by the 8th of June, which will then give you an opportunity to complete as much of the development of the product over the summer holidays, okay, which is when you really want to get this done by, okay. We've then got, you need to produce the video. That's going to be the end of September, and the whole thing's going to be handed in on the 2nd of November. Okay, so this has just been a brief introduction to your internal assessment. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks for watching.